Chapter 11. Heather. Date unknown. It took Thomas about 5 minutes to make the trip back to the tunnel. Due to the cliffside looming in between, a direct route was not possible, which made the walk take longer than the distance between the 2 points would suggest it should. The short hike reminded Thomas of just how close Heather's tent was to the tunnel, a fact he was now certain wasn't a coincidence. Still raining, most of his time back at the tunnel was spent huddled at the top of the stairwell, checking and rechecking his bags to make sure he had everything. Everything. He chuckled to himself. He had everything he'd packed all right, whatever good that would do him now. After checking the bags, Thomas patted at his chest, feeling for the only possession he'd brought with him that actually still mattered. The Antaeus. Still there. After it had accomplished its purpose in the tunnel, Thomas thought it best to keep the device on him at all times. He placed it in the chest pocket of his undershirt, ensuring he could always feel its weight. Bert's instructions had been painstakingly clear. After attaching the device to the altar, Thomas needed to allow the mechanism to run for a minimum of 11 seconds before detaching it. The duration beyond that point didn't matter, as long as it ran for more than 11 seconds. Bert's letter had stated directly, more than once, and in all caps, not to detach the device until 11 seconds had passed. Thomas had waited 30 just to be safe. All caps are serious after all. Thomas closed the hatch door, secured its handle, and considered for a moment if he should attempt to hide it from visibility somehow. He ultimately decided not to bother. While he could potentially obscure the view of the door with wet leaves and branches, the concrete rising out of the ground would remain visible, unless he spent far more time on the project than he was willing to at the moment. The area seemed pretty remote, and as far as he knew, he was still the only person with access to the Antaeus. He was hoping that would be enough. Before heading back to the campsite, Thomas took a moment to survey the woods. It seemed to be getting darker, and he needed a plan before night fell. Soaking wet, 2 bags over his right shoulder, looking lost in the middle of the woods, he recapped his situation. Enter tunnel in Flat Petersburg on sunny day. Start ancient device in tunnel. See creepy skeleton. Exit tunnel somewhere that is definitely not Flat Petersburg on rainy day. Walk 100 meters. See tent. Girl who already knows name comes out of tent and says she has been waiting for his arrival. That was about it. Well, not entirely. For some reason, he felt it was also worth noting that tent girl happened to be remarkably attractive. Stunningly so, actually, if one believed her story that she'd just been hanging out at a rainy campsite in the woods waiting for him for who knows how long. Did her looks matter? He wasn't sure, but he figured they would at some point. Many would consider a mysterious, beautiful woman waiting for them at the end of a tunnel to be a lucky break, but Thomas generally didn't consider himself lucky. He needed to figure out who she was and what she knew, and he needed to do so while giving her as little information as possible. As difficult as it would be, he couldn't let his guard down for a pretty girl. He started the hike back. 20 minutes later, and now dry, Thomas sat across from the stranger inside the small green tent. Heather had put on a gray sweatshirt and graciously agreed to stand outside in the final remnants of a drizzle while Thomas changed into an extra pair of clothes. Had he known he was going to need to change this soon into the trip, he would have packed differently. There were already a number of things he wished had done differently. So, how was the trip? Heather asked nonchalantly. Thomas did not know how to respond. It was clear that this woman, just like almost everybody else, knew far more about what was going on with Thomas than Thomas did. I'm confused, Thomas said softly. It sounds like you were expecting me, but I don't really understand what's going on. Do you know me? Heather laughed, and then let out a sigh. I imagine you have all sorts of questions, she said, shaking her head. That's kind of why I'm here, but I'm afraid I won't be able to answer everything. She stood up from her chair and reached out her hand. Thomas shook it. I'm Heather Trice. It's nice to formally meet you. I guess you could say I'm a friend of Bert Klein's, although I'm a little upset with him right now. This whole thing took a lot longer than he told me it would. I met Bert about a month ago when I was hiking a few of the nearby parks. I wasn't planning on sticking around, but thinking about our conversations in hindsight, I'm starting to think Bert knew how this was going to go down all along. Either way, 2 weeks ago Bert asked me to wait for you at this exact location. He claimed I'd only have to be out here a few days. Said you'd be here a week and a half ago, give or take a day. Obviously he was wrong. Thomas stayed silent. He had many questions, but he still didn't know how much Heather knew, and he didn't want to give her any information he didn't have to. Anyways, Bert knew I needed money for my trip, and since I already had the tent and was hiking the trails anyways, he hired me to wait for a guy matching your description named Thomas Redmond, which I assume is you. He told me to help you get on your feet when you arrive, as he worded it. Thomas shifted in his chair. He had to be careful here. So, he began slowly. You were hiking at one of the parks nearby. You met Bert. He told you he'd pay you if you would wait around in a tent for some random stranger for a week and a half, and that's what you did. Heather laughed again. She laughed a lot. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? You kind of have to know me. I'm a bit of a roamer. Remember, it was only supposed to be a few days. And he paid well. I turned him down initially, but in the end, I figured why not? It's kind of exciting. Thomas was silent for a moment and then spoke again. Yeah, I guess. You said you were hiking at some parks. I don't know of a lot of great parks for hiking around here. At least not that people purposely travel to. Heather tilted her head and squinted. What? She said, surprised. It's Hocking Hills, Thomas. I was at Old Man's Cave. It's known for hiking. Hocking Hills. In Ohio? Thomas asked before considering the question. Yeah, she said with a smile. I'm not aware of another. Thomas treaded lightly with this. He'd already made a mistake and it was obvious she was confused by it, but he needed to know exactly where he was right now. That's quite a trip, Thomas said. Bert must have really paid well if you were willing to go that far for such a strange request. It was another risk, but he had to take it. That far? She echoed. It wasn't far at all. I was hiking 15 minutes up the road. Thomas was getting there now, but he needed to bridge the gap without being too obvious. You're saying Old Man's Cave is only 15 minutes from where we are right now? Yeah, like I said, I was the perfect person for Bert's silly task. Where are you coming from, by the way? Is this your first time in Ohio or something? Bert didn't tell you? He didn't tell me hardly anything about you. He made it all sound quite secretive and acted as if it'd be better if I didn't know. All he told me was where you would show up, approximately when you would show up, and that when you did show up, you'd seem really confused. Honestly, the main reason I stuck around as long as I did was just because I wanted to see how it played out. Thomas had to think quickly. It was starting to add up. When he entered the tunnel, he hadn't even considered the possibility that it would move his physical location, but it was clear based on his surroundings and what Heather had told him that it had. This changed things. He decided to keep questioning her and see what happened. I'm traveling from Michigan, he began. It's been a while since I've been to Ohio. I guess I didn't realize how close we were to Old Man's Cave. I used to go there as a kid. I just got into the area a few days ago. He watched for her reaction. There was none. He decided to push his luck one step further just to be sure. What would you say is the closest big city to where we are right now? He asked. Heather began. Big city? Not much big around here. Lancaster is just northwest. Wouldn't call it big. Columbus is a bit further in the same direction. There's a road atlas over there if you want to look. Brand new. I haven't even opened it yet. She pointed to the corner of the tent. Thomas stood up and grabbed the book. It was still in plastic wrapping. He looked at the front cover. In the upper left corner, he saw the price, $1.25. Then he saw the publication date in the lower right, 1967.